Okay, now let's move to chapter 3, the liturgical life of the brothers. Chapter 3, the earlier rule, is of course about the liturgical rhythm of the brothers' life in praying the divine office. The Lord's teaching on prayer finds its ultimate fulfillment in the deed of praying the divine office. The brothers follow the custom of the local church in praying the office. Simply join in the pattern of the local church as identified by the local clergy. Now, the divine office in its origin is based on monastic practice of praying 5 or 6 times a day, a prayer that became known as the hours. Although that monastic practice is based on the Jewish and early Christian practices. Yet, in the earlier rule, the practice is modified, as we have heard, according to the different situations of the brothers. Now, the point at hand is that the gospel life of giving all to the poor demands a life of daily liturgically structured shared prayer. The deed of prayer follows the inheritance of praying the prayers that Jesus prayed, the Psalms. And of course, praying the prayer that Jesus taught us. This kind of prayer follows the teaching and the footprints of Jesus. Jesus' teaching on fasting is implemented indeed. In a similar way, not by strict monastic fasting, but rather by participating in the then current fasting practice of the church. Now, moving through the pages of Joy the Gospel, note how Pope Francis incorporates prayer as a subtext. For example, working through chapters 1 and 2, Pope Francis articulates the conviction that in the beauty of the liturgy, the Church evangelizes and witnesses the gospel, and is also thereby evangelized. That is, in the liturgy, we both hear and proclaim the gospel. He writes, we must be careful not to lose contact or connection with each other. And without the discipline of some shared ecclesial prayer, he writes, we become nomads without roots. This is also true for the life of the brothers. St. Francis and his early brothers were careful to include some form of the divine office. And they emphasized fasting as well, to the extent of sharing in the common practice of the church. In a word, a world culture that rejects the transcendent, writes the Pope, this practice is necessary for restoration and maintenance of a sense of the mystical, and necessary for the avoidance of individualistic devotions based on alleged private revelations, especially those not corresponding to popular piety. The divine office, composed with psalms of praise and thanksgiving, encourages, on the contrary, a relationship with the Father. That is, a communion which heals, promotes, and reinforces interpersonal bonds. To promote this kind of prayer, the Pope calls for new innovative spaces and possibilities within what he calls the spiritual desertification of our cities.